What's up guys, Polk here, and welcome back to my final pre-Heads Up No Limit course launch video where I'm going to be breaking down a large pot that I played on the recent Heads Up duel. I'm going to be getting into exactly how to play this spot and what I should have done a little bit differently. But before we do that, I want to let you guys know that next week, in fact in just a few days now, on Monday, October 9th, my Heads Up No Limit course, the End Boss System with myself and fellow coach Fabian Adler will be launching. The price point will be $999, the same as my original Heads Up course 6 years ago. This course is going to have a ton of Heads Up No Limit content. It's going to have the correct pre-flop ranges, optimal flop sizes, plenty of hands to break down and review, a walkthrough of all board textures and spots in the game tree, some practice where we run through hands, me breaking down hands like I have in some of these videos, and Fabian taking you through the technical nitty-gritty of how to play Heads Up No Limit at a super high level. This is the best Heads Up course that has ever been created, and the great part is because of where we are at now in terms of solutions of poker, we're not going to need to make one of these again down the road. This will be the end boss conclusive course to play Heads Up No Limit. And you can take that and of course apply that to many other game types as well to learn how to handle wide range situations and improve your play. At the end of this video, I'm going to go ahead and break down the course, go a little more in detail, show you a little bit about the course, talk about some specifics. But let's at this point go ahead and jump into the action.
When you're doing it.
Raise 25. Call.
I didn't follow that.
Our hand begins at 600, 1200 blinds with stacks that are about 65,000. So a little bit outside of my comfort zone here in terms of stack size. We're now in the 55, 60-ish type blind range. Not really where I've played many hands, but I do still think there's some great concepts that we can take away from this. Our hand begins on the button. I look down 9-7 of spades and open it up. I'm still on a stack size where I'm going to raise all my hands, but pretty soon around here I will start limping. On this stack though, I'm going to play raise or fold and make it a bit smaller size, just over a min raise here on the button. To Daniel with ace 10, this is the kind of hand that's interesting because on 100 big blinds, you always would want to be 3-betting it. As stacks get a little bit shorter, maybe it makes a bit more sense to put in some flats. If Daniel 3-bets and gets 4-bet, this hand is a pretty horrible situation to be in. That said, I'm pretty sure his hand still would 3-bet a lot of the time, given that when you get quite deep, this hand likes to flat. On 100 big blinds, you do a pure 3-bet strategy. I imagine this hand will mainly be raising. However, just calling is also a totally fine play, which Daniel does decide to do, and let's take a flop.
I'm not sure I did either, but I did follow the flat call by the ace 10 of hearts, which, rather, ace 10 offsuit. Still could have been a candidate for a 3-bet with some frequency, but not on this occasion, as Polk with the open ender.
17.
Follows through, gets called.
The flop becomes king 8-6, 2 clubs. I flop an open ender and Daniel flops ace high. Now, in my post-flop analysis here, I recently did a Twitter poll asking you guys what kind of analysis that you like. And it seems like the average person watching these videos wants something a little more middle of the road with some advanced tips and also not too much solver work. So I have run the solution. I'm going to go through it a little bit, but I'm going to try and be a bit more balanced in the amount of solver stuff that I put into this video. That said, given that this is a video introducing a $999 course, maybe I should do nitty gritty. I don't know, guys. I make videos on the internet. Back to the hand here, king 8-6, 2 clubs. Daniel checks as he should with all of his hands. And now this is kind of an interesting spot with 9-7 of spades. In this situation, you don't always want to be betting the flop. And this is something that I think a lot of players, a trap that they fall into. They feel I have equity, I have a draw, I need to be betting the flop. You want to be playing your draws in a way that is blended into both your flop bets and your checks so that you remain unpredictable and you can have very strong hands in both lines. However, typically speaking, because draws do benefit a lot from betting, you have fold equity, you can win immediately if they fold. And then also you can barrel later streets where you have equity or can improve to strong hands. These hands do make a lot of sense to bet and mainly should bet, but I want you to know a lot of checking happens as well. In fact, just a couple hands before this, I did have a hand where I flopped the straight draw and checked it back. So you can see that I'm balancing my draws in this way to make sure that I have these hands in both lines. Pulling up the solver here for a moment, we can see all of the hands that we would like to be betting on the flop. Red means bet, green means check. 9-7 actually does do a ton of betting here on the flop. In fact, the non-flush draw, non-backdoor flush draw hands bets 83% of the time. It's likely that I actually did a little bit more checking than this in game. Typically speaking, I tend to put my draws more in the 50 to 75% flop bet frequency, unless it's a board where I'm going to be betting a really high amount. This flop only bet 61% of the time, so it's likely I bet this flop a little bit less often than the 83% we see with 9-7 of spades. However, if we look at some other hands, we can see more checking happens. 7-5 off is only betting the flop here 80% instead of 91% for 9-7. And then hands like 10-9 are also doing a good chunk of checking. 73% bet on the flop with 10-9. 5-4, even more checking, 60% bet on the flop. So I'm basically just showing you guys that draws do a lot of checking here on the board. That said, this is a flop that you want to bet very often, and I do decide to go ahead and bet 1,700 chips. Over to Daniel now in the big blind. A good amount of check raising does happen here. 9% of the time, Daniel should be going for a check raise strategy if we're using a 2/3 pot check raise size. Daniel's strategy to check raise should include hands like top 2 that hand will almost always check raise, and he'll also mix in some hands like top and bottom 2. Daniel's not really going to have sets here, although on this stack size, he might have a few hands like pocket sixes. I'm not exactly sure how it shifts as we get down to the stack. That said, he's mainly going to have the 2 pairs for value, and he's going to work in bluffs like 10-9, 10-7, 9-7 as his kinds of hands you want to bluff with and can barrel on later streets. This is a very polarized check raise strategy for Daniel that I think plays pretty well on later streets. That said, with ace-10 here, slam dunk check call, the solver will always check call, and let's take a turn.
Oh, how about an ace on the turn?
This is sort of the beauty about just calling pre a hand as good as ace-10. You're under-repped, right? I think Doug would expect ace-10 to be 3-betting. He's going to try and represent here. Daniel knows that to be the case. A great card for Doug to want to continue his bluffs.
But do we want to keep those bluffs in or look to deny any possible equity?
The turn comes the ace of hearts. Daniel turns top pair. We still have an open ender, but we do not improve. On the turn, Daniel checks as he should with all of his hands. Now, the couple questions here in position. The first question is, what size do I like to bet here when I do decide to bet? And I think I actually made a mistake in game here. I decided to bet for full pot. On second thought here, I think this should be a geometric size, which means I bet an amount on the turn that is the same as a river jam. Now, typically speaking, on overcard turns, 100% pot is a nice turn barrel size. But I think specifically in this instance, given the stack sizes behind, I think it makes more sense to bet a size that sets up a river jam. This is a bit more function of the stack sizes rather than maybe what's the optimal size. Although you could maybe even make an argument on the ace turn, 150% pot would be preferred regardless. Anyway, back to the hand. What should I have done? I bet 8,400. I bet the full size of the pot. And according to the solver solution, I should have bet a bit larger. We can now see what the solver would do here in position. In the top right, you can see that it would mainly bet 1,250. That's 12,500. But it would do a little bit of my size and almost no betting very small. So if I had to pick the best size, given that this one happens the most, really I should probably be looking to bet a geometric pot size here on the turn, although my size is not terrible. When I run the analysis on both these sizes, the value for imposition on my size is 461.5. The value on the geometric is 461.9. So really, my size is just about fine. It's just a slightly less optimal size than geometric, and I don't like to make errors, which is why I make so many. Back to the hand, let's go ahead and look at what I should do if I do bet my full pot size instead of the size that would be correct. And we can see the imposition strategy. Here we see the flop bet, or the turn bets rather. We can see that 9-7 of spades does do a healthy amount of checking back on the turn as well. One cool note here, see how the 9-7 of diamonds does more checking than the other 9-7s? That's because you don't want to bluff here on the turn with diamonds. I want my opponent to have a diamond in their hand that check called the flop to check fold the turn because the backdoor flush draw cards did not get in. That kind of small difference might seem irrelevant to someone at an amateur level, but will actually be an important note for good players as you begin to dive deeper into analyzing the game tree. Anyway, what do we bet for value here? Well, we do have a lot of ace-x hands that bet the flop for this flop size, so we do have a good chunk of top pairs. We can actually even value bet some of our kings here on the turn. Kind of surprises me how low we can go. Even king 9 can get in there for a value bet on the turn. As for our bluffs, plenty of straight draws, 7-5 getting in there, 5-4, even some 5-3 off with basically just nothing other than a club. We're going to be doing some barreling, as well as some hands like 5 deuce of hearts. I think these types of bluffs are very surprising to people, but the solver does bet with some really shitty hands on the turn to set up some bluffs on various runouts. As for my hand, definitely doing a good solid amount of betting here on the turn. You want to be mixing in some checks, but again, a very fine hand to be betting the turn with. Over to Daniel here with top pair 10 kicker. You can see his hand almost gets into raise territory. The solver actually would occasionally raise his hand on the turn, with the idea being better hands are going to stack him anyway. And by raising hands like ace 10, he allows himself an opportunity to get value from some hands like, for example, 9-7, or knock out equity in the pot from those hands on the river. Anyway, Daniel does go ahead and check call, and I think it's safe to say you can check call all the time here without giving him much EV, given that the overall raise frequency would be just 2.6% of the time. Daniel ultimately does decide to call, and let's go ahead and take a river.
In the form of the flat in the face of the 8,400 chip sizing and now unimproved with 9 high is Doug Polk on this river with 25,000 plus in the middle. This is a healthy sized pot compared to the average on the evening.
No club in Daniel's hand makes this difficult in the event that Doug does continue an aggressive pursuit. Wow.
Well, the clubs got there, huh? Always clubs. How much is the bet? You can pause right when I get a count.
Polk, by the way, unblocking clubs, but obviously knows he's not up against them any longer.
Almost raised the turn myself. Would have been better.
And you see Daniel instantly lamenting his decision to come with the flat on the turn as opposed to put the raise in, which maybe would not have left him in this spot.
He has been correct a high percentage of the time in this entire match. Let's see if he can make the most important decision right here, right now.
If he clicks call, it's over, Brent.
Done.
Just note the sizing in relation to the pot. This is a poor proposition. And if Daniel calls and he's wrong,
You win.
oh my gosh,
Wow.
he did make the call, and he didn't take altogether that long to make
Good
it.
game, man.
Good game, bro.
In spite of not having
Cheers.
any clubs himself. Daniel Negreanu
See the live poker realm. That's it.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
finds the big call
just
and
can't fold.
takes down round 2
Yeah,
of high stakes
minor.
duel 4.
The river comes the queen of clubs. The flush gets in. I've bricked my straight draw, and Daniel still has the best hand with top pair. Now Daniel checks it over to me. Here in this situation, typically speaking, on the river is the first spot. You'd be using 2 different sizes when you do bet, a smaller one and a larger one. Your classic in position split will be 2/3 pot, or in this scenario, all in. When you're deeper, it'll be 2/3 pot or 150% pot, but given our stack size here, it will be 2/3 or jam. Here we can see what my in position range will be doing on the river. Now, if we go over to 9-7 of spades, you can actually see my hand does not ever bluff the river. In game, I thought that it would bet some of the time, and if it does bet, you actually would most likely prefer to use the smaller river bet size. The reason is that without a club here, our hand simply does not have the removal necessary in order to bluff. That said, it's not a very huge mistake here to go ahead and bet for a large size on the river, but you do lose about 660 chips in doing so, a mistake nonetheless. Our preferred hands to bluff with are hands like, for example, 5-4, where we unblock some of these higher straight draws that could check call the turn. We also especially like to bluff when we have the club. Look at 5-4 here. This is a pretty good example of what I'm talking about when we're trying to pick our bluff allocation. We can see that from 5-4 clubs, When you have 5-4 with the club, it likes to jam. When you have 5-4 without the club, you like to bet the smaller size. So the dark red means all in, and the lighter pink means 2/3 pot. So all in all, this is a mistake. My hand slightly too high. I will say I don't think that it is a huge mistake if the EV difference is so close. You can see 7-5 will always bluff sometimes, or I should rephrase that. 7-5 will bluff sometimes. There are no combos that are purely checking back. But even still, if we look at 7-5 without a club, you can see that it's mainly checking, and when it does bet, it uses 2/3 pot size. So this is a slight mistake for me to be jamming 9-7 of spades. Close, but a bit too aggressive. Over to Daniel now. After I do decide to go all in, Ace-10's actually in a very tough situation. Ace-10 without a club should do a good chunk of folding here. Ace-10 with a club mainly calls, especially if it has the ace of clubs, you can go ahead and call. But putting the solver to the side for a moment here in this situation, Daniel and I have played a very large number of hands. And I think one thing that probably is going through Daniel's head as he's considering what he should be doing in this situation is this guy is full of shit quite often. Daniel has played many hands versus me, and he understands that my ranges are pretty aggressive in a lot of these spots. So I do think when it's close, he's probably going to err on the side of having to call down because he does know that I'm going to have plenty of bluffs in these situations, which maybe means that I should make sure that I'm not over bluffing like I am in this hand. But guys, that's poker. And that's really where I'm trying to take this. Besides the fact that I got stacked in this hand and ended up losing the match and $100,000. But besides that, you're always going to have your tendencies, and trying to steer away from them is an important part of poker. I tend to want to bluff too much and be aggressive and win pots, which is a good thing to try and strive towards. But I also try to reel it in. However, it's hard to know exactly how far in do you reel, because maybe on the flop I bet half the time. Maybe on the turn I bet half the time. Maybe on the river I only jammed a fourth of the time. But this hand actually should never be doing that. This is the importance of putting in work away from the table and learning and improving and getting better. You have some actual things you can take away from the spot, right? We know that on the river we split into two sizes. The small size blockers are less important. The big size tends to use some removal effects that are more likely to get the folds. We learned about splitting our straight draws into multiple ranges. We learned about the efficiency of in-position bluffs. We learned a lot of stuff here. I'll note one more thing that I think is kind of cool about this spot, which didn't matter as much in retrospect. Daniel very, very rarely has flushes here in the big blind. Given that there's two clubs on the flop, an offsuit ace in the turn, and the queen of clubs in the river, I don't think Daniel's going to have the suited ace hands that much pre-flop. Those mainly 3-bet. He can't have king x of clubs. He can't have queen x of clubs because those don't exist. So really it leaves hands like jack 9 of clubs or 8x of clubs. So I don't think Daniel has flushes all that often, and that made me feel like I needed to be a bit more aggressive in this spot than I might in most situations. All in all, a nice call on the river by Daniel, and maybe a little bit of a questionable bluff on my end, but I can see why I thought that I should be betting the river some of the time. If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch daily PokerGo content highlights on their YouTube channel, and you can also watch PokerGo's entire offering of live streaming and episode releases from the World Series of Poker, high stakes poker, and much more at the links below. Before we go today, I want to go a bit more in depth and talk about the NBOS system and why I think it can provide you a lot of value, exactly what is in there, and you can make a decision about if this is going to be worth it for you or not. So to start off with, poker is a little bit different than a lot of games where you spend money learning. It's more of a business to business kind of transaction. If we think about it like this, let's just say that you are a competitive poker player and you're going to play for the next 5-10 years, maybe even just a few years. Well, $1,000, if let's just say you, for example, play 2-5, that would be 200 big blinds. Are you going to make 5 or 10 more big blinds a month by listening to really good players talk about poker for something like 40 hours? I would go ahead and say the answer to that is almost certainly yes. Now, there are certainly some kinds of people where this course will not be a good fit. If you play very casually, it won't be a great fit. If you don't have the time to go through so much information, it's not going to be a great fit. If you do not like very technical breakdowns to understand the exact sizes for things, it's not going to be a very good fit. If you do not find heads up no limit poker interesting at all, or in fact shorthanded poker interesting at all, or you don't want to know what ranges should be in spots, this is not going to be a good fit. But when I think back to who can get a lot of value out of this course, I think back to the first heads up course that I made just about six or 7 years ago now. I basically broke down my exact heads up strategy over the course of a 30-ish hour course and explained to people how to use the game tree to your advantage to build bluffs and value into all of your lines. I think I've gotten more compliments from that course than any other thing I've done in terms of poker education. A lot of people have told me it completely changed the way they looked at poker and it allowed them to play in a much better, more balanced way and become strong winners playing the game of poker. I'm hoping to bring the same thing here to this course. I don't launch a lot of courses. I mean, this is my second course in 6 or 7 years. This is not something that I do very frequently. And I try to stay kind of in my lane, right? I do play a lot of ring poker. You've probably seen me playing a lot of the high stakes shows. I've definitely had some big wins and losses on streams earlier this year. But I try to really teach in games that I'm much more knowledgeable in because I think for you, the person taking this course, you deserve that. Now, what can you get out of this course if you're a heads up player? If you're a heads up player, this is just an absolute slam dunk. You have to buy this course. In my personal opinion, if you start tables, if you play heads up, even just to see what optimal ranges look like, I mean, there's just simply no way you don't get value out of it. I think if you're someone that mainly plays in ring games and you play at a higher stakes level, I think this is still a good opportunity for you because you can learn how to approach wide range situations and improve the way you think about the game of poker. I think also if you're just interested in playing poker at a high level or learning from myself or Fabian, I think this is another great opportunity for you to join the course. So exactly what is the course? The NBOSS system is a 40-ish hour course between the main course and the add-on course. Over the course of those 40 hours, you're going to learn a bunch from both Fabian and myself. Fabian does something more like 20, 25 hours. I'm in there for more like 15 to 20. So it's definitely a balancing act. We're going to have a lot of Fabian in there, but there is a healthy dose of both of us. I like to think of it like this. Fabian gives you the technical details, walking you through the different sizes on boards, breaking down frequencies over baseline or below baseline based on the characteristics of certain holdings. And then I will break down more specific hands, things you can take away, kind of transition the knowledge from Fabian over to you in a way that makes it more easy to digest. We also do a good amount of work together. We also talk about playing live heads up. We talk about playing online heads up. We talk about playing deep stack heads up. We talk about playing shorter stack heads up. And we also give you a variety of tools to help you improve, including optimal pre-flop ranges for 100 big blinds or deeper, all of the optimal sizes for both pre-flop sizes in terms of 3-betting, 4-betting, all that kind of stuff, but also all of the optimal flop sizes. We basically had every flop ran to go down to optimal single size, so you know exactly what size to be betting on the flop, given your range. We also have optimal check raise sizes. We have optimal 3-bet pot sizes. We have all of the flop optimization it comes down to when you're looking at single size optimal ranges. We also break down turn and river into different buckets, how to understand what texture turn is the most optimal turn size. And then on rivers, we discuss splitting in a variety of ways, how to use the small and river split ranges, what goes into each one, and then how to approach thinking about creating those ranges in game. We also go through the game in terms of its entire game tree. The course starts with an intro and then a pre-flop section, and then it'll go into single raise pot, both in and out of position, 3-bet pot in and out of position, 4-bet pot in and out of position. So tons of content here before you even get to the live arena, which all 12 hours were done by myself, where I walk you through what it takes to play in high stakes heads up battles. I obviously have an open heads up challenge at the lodge where you can buy in for $100,000 and anyone can take it. So that has, of course, given us some great content. I break it down my strategy, how I randomize, how I approach spots, get in there in the weeds with some hand analysis. I mean, honestly, I'm very, very proud of what we put together here. I think it's tremendous value for you if you're trying to improve your game of poker. And I think that the concepts you can take from this course and apply to anything. So a bit long-winded, but I did want to give you a in-depth breakdown. Again, that course launches on Monday, October 9th. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the description below, and you will have 1 week to purchase. and receive the live arena bonus course for free. So thank you guys for joining me today. If you're interested in the course, looking forward to having you guys in there. If not, thanks for hearing me out, and I hope you enjoyed the free information I put here on YouTube. I think this is some really good, high-quality stuff to help improve your heads-up game. And thank you guys for watching today. I'll see you again soon.